Hello everybody! I'm coming to you today in a lower tech version. You know, I think this is a little bit bright. Let's make this a little less bright. I've been taking videos of our foster kittens, and the room in there is kind of dark, so I turned the camera brightness up for that. Okay, what you see before you is a bunch of broccoli stumps. So my husband and I really like roasted broccoli. But I am not such a big fan of the stumps, the non-floret parts of the broccoli. So what I'm doing here is I'm just like removing all the bits of the stump that have been, you know, exposed for, like parts of these broccoli stumps are 2 weeks old or so. It's just what's left over after I roast us broccoli florets. So I'm just cutting off the bits that are just kind of like old and woody and, you know, not going to taste as good. And the ones that are like, I don't know, you probably can't see this very well on the camera, but these are a little older. But broccoli stumps last a very long time in the fridge. So I just kind of save them up. This is like a couple weeks worth of stumps. And once I have a fair amount of them, I've been turning them into soup. And you've probably heard of broccoli cheddar soup. That's basically what this is. Only instead of using like whole broccoli and the florets, I'm just using the stumps instead of throwing them away because I paid for them and they have flavor and they have nutrition. And since they're also a little bit starchy, they make a really nice base for a creamy vegetable soup. So I have a big pot and I've just turned it on to medium heat and I've got a couple tablespoons of butter. This soup that I'm making, I'm not really using a recipe, although I do have a like written recipe on my Patreon for $4 patrons. It's been up there for a couple months. But basically, this is sort of like a blueprint for a cream of any kind of vegetable soup. It's from Brian Langerstrom. I'm going to be referencing that guy a lot, probably during the next year or so, because my husband and I have been on a real Brian Langerstrom kick. He has a lot of good recipes and good tips and stuff. He's a professional chef. Anyway, he has a video up there for just like a blueprint for your basic cream of any vegetable soup. And yeah, like I use that theory. Basically, you start with some fat, any kind of fat. In this case, I'm using butter. I usually opt for butter because it's tastier. But you know, you can use olive oil, you can use animal fat that you've rendered. Use some fat. Don't be afraid of fat. And then you saute with that fat some aromatics, usually like a French mirepoix. So I've got an onion here, and I've got a couple carrots that have seen better days. I'm going to peel this stuff and then freeze that and use it for stock later. And a stalk of celery that has also seen better days. It looks dirty, but it's not. This is just like old, like turning brown because it's getting old. So basically, like a lot of the ingredients in the soup are like stuff that I always keep in my fridge. I always have carrots, I always have onions, I always have celery. And then I also like to add some potato to give it some creaminess and thickness and body. And that's another thing that I always have in my house. So if you always have like these building block ingredients like carrots and celery and onions and potatoes, anytime you have like any kind of leftover vegetable that you need to use up, so you can not throw it away and save money and reduce food waste, you can just turn it into a cream of that vegetable soup. And like, you don't have to be very careful the way you chop this. I'm going to puree the soup at the very end until it's creamy smooth. That's how I like my soups. My husband does not. He does not prefer it that way. So I compromise by cooking a little diced potato and just kind of putting that into his individual bowl of soup later. But I have mine creamy smooth at the end. I don't know how much broccoli stump this is. I never measure anything. But it's, you know, probably going to be a good 4 to 5 cups of broccoli stump. Oh, and this cutting board I'm using, my husband got it for me for Christmas. It's a really nice, pretty cutting board. And yeah, over the years in my life, I've often struggled with, what do I do with these cursed broccoli stumps? I know you can buy broccoli crowns only, you know, in the plastic bags, but it's usually more expensive to buy it that way, and it's usually less fresh. So I like to buy them whole. But I've never liked the broccoli stumps. You can just totally cook them normally. You can steam them, you can roast them and eat them. I just don't like them. so much. But in this soup, I like them. You get the flavor without just, I don't know, the ickiness of eating broccoli stump. And yeah, I'm just not being very careful. I'm just kind of chopping them into pieces so that they'll cook somewhat evenly. I chopped the broccoli stump first because I'm making a video and it's about broccoli stump soup, and I thought I might as well start with the thing that the video is about. But in actual fact, your first step is you're going to want to cut the onion. So here's my onion. And again, I always have onions in my house. I always make sure that I have more than I think I'm going to need, so that if I ever need to, you know, scrounge up something to eat, or, you know, do what I'm doing now, cook something to use up ingredients that are going to go bad if I don't use them. I always have an onion on hand to put in some kind of recipe, because just about any savory recipe is improved with the addition of an onion. I usually like to remove this like little outer skin. Like, you can totally eat this, but it kind of tends to be a little fibrous. And that way I can also save that and turn it into stock later. If you're a follower of this channel, you know my method of keeping things in old cottage cheese or yogurt containers. This one is almost full. Ugh. But yeah, anytime I have carrot, onion, or celery scraps, I save them and freeze them until I have a lot of them. And then anytime I have chicken, I save the bones and freeze them. And then once I have enough of all of those things, I turn it into broth. Which is actually what this thing is. It's not Nancy's yogurt, it's chicken broth. Actually, I don't know for sure if it's chicken broth. It might be goose broth or duck broth. I don't label my things, so it's a surprise. Yeah, and with the onion too, you don't even really have to, you know, worry about chopping it carefully, because this is all going to be pureed anyway. Since there's no room on this cutting board, I'm just putting it directly into my pot of butter. Off camera. If you're hearing the sizzling, that's what that is. I'm going ahead and doing a whole onion, just because I don't want to have leftover half of an onion in my fridge. I will be going grocery shopping in a couple days. That's the plan. And I do still have one other whole onion in the fridge in case I want to cook something else before I go shopping again. There! See? Just salting it to help bring out the moisture. I don't want to brown the onions, I just want to cook them down a bit. Celery. Save that for stock. I'll just go ahead and put that in with the onion right now. What I want to do a little more of with this channel moving forward, this isn't really going to apply if you're watching this video like way after the fact. If you're watching it way after April of 2023, this won't really apply. These carrots look old and disgusting, but they're fine on the inside, I promise. Anyway, what I want to do more of with this channel is more, I don't know, just techniques that are practical for the home cook. Less, you know, recipes. Because I feel like a lot of beginner-level home cooks get into a trap of always cooking recipes. Like, they always need a recipe for everything, and they always cook from recipes. And the problem with that is often your recipes will make you wind up with a lot of bits of leftover ingredients. Like, you'll have half a container of yogurt left over, and half an onion, and half a package of kale left over. And then if you don't know how to cook using techniques and like strategies as a home cook, you're not necessarily going to know how to use up all of those leftover bits of ingredients, and then you wind up throwing them away and losing a lot of money and you know, producing a lot of food waste, which is bad for the environment. So I want to focus a little more on just like more practical techniques and solutions and strategies of ways that you can cut down on food waste and save a lot of money. By cooking more just, you know, blueprint recipes like this, like I said, this isn't really a recipe so much as it's a technique. And like any vegetable that you have left over in your fridge that you have no plans for and you don't know what to do with it, like you can turn it into a soup like this. If you get into the habit of keeping a bunch of, you know, staples in your pantry and fridge, things like carrots and celery and onions and potatoes, these things last a very, very long time in your fridge. Like they do not go bad that easily. So you can like keep them on hand. And that way, anytime you find yourself with extra, any vegetable that you just need to use up but you don't know how, you can make the soup. I mean, there are a lot of other recipes that I do that are like that in the sense that they use up old vegetables that I need to get rid of, that are not a cream soup, which is nice for other times of the year when it's not cold. But it is cold and stormy today, so that's why I'm making the soup. So here's my carrots, onions, and celery, sauteing down in the pot. I'm going to add a couple garlic cloves. This is another something that I always have on hand. I find if you just kind of smash it like that, the skin loosens pretty easily and you can get it off without that much of a fuss. Boop. This one's got an owie. Wow. That goes through most of the clove. That's fine. These are really big cloves anyway. And again, like this is going to be pureed anyway, so I'm just giving it a very rough chop just to open it up a little bit. I needed some dill for a recipe a little while ago, and they didn't have any dill on its own, so I had to get a seafood blend because it had dill in it, and it came with some Italian parsley as well. And there's some thyme in here that I don't really have any plans for, so I'm just going to throw that into the soup too. Probably won't even make that much of a difference flavor-wise. I just want to use it up before it goes bad. Okay, so the onions, if my camera will focus, as you can see, they're a little translucent. You can kind of see through them a little bit. So that means we're ready for the next stage. So you got your mirepoix, your onions and or carrots and celery, a little garlic, and some fat, and now I'm adding just my vegetable, which in this case is broccoli stump, your vegetable that you have to get rid of. Like, I won't say that this recipe works with, like, literally any vegetable. Obviously, you wouldn't want to use, like, vegetables that you eat raw, like lettuce or cucumber. Like, lettuce soup is a thing that does exist. It sounds disgusting to me. Like, you'd have to use certain kinds of lettuce, like the real bitter ones. But yeah, I mean, you could do this with squash, you could do this with all carrot, you could do it with sweet potato, tomato, corn, zucchini. I mean, you could probably do this with just about any vegetable that you happen to have. Mushroom. Add a little more salt. Now that I have a clear cutting board again, I'm going to cut my potato. And this is optional, you don't have to add potato, but I like to add potato to my cream of vegetable soups because it gives them a lot of creaminess without adding cream. And it also gives it body and thickness, and it makes it, you know, more caloric, which is actually a good thing. A lot of people are like, oh, you know, low calorie is better. It's like, well, if you want to feed yourself and be full, calories are good, actually. So I like adding potato. Don't know if I'll add 2 potatoes right now, probably just the one. I didn't bother peeling it because I don't really care, but if you care, you can peel it. It's just a Yukon Gold potato. Their skin does not offend me. Okay, so now we are ready to add the next component to this soup blueprint, and that is liquid. You need liquid to turn this into a soup. You have so many options for liquid. You can use water, you can use wine, you can use broth, you can use milk or cream, or any combination of the above. So I'm going to put in a little broth. Now it's probably about 2 cups. I might add all of the broth I have in this container because I've got a lot of stuff in here. Yeah, let's add all of it. And the objective here is to cover all the veggies, and they're not. So I'm going to add some milk as well, which is what I wanted to do anyway. I'm probably adding about 2 cups of milk. But yeah, again, basically add enough liquid so that your veggies are all covered, but just covered. You don't want to drown them too much. If you need more liquid, you can always add it very easily, but if you added too much liquid, you have to like evaporate it, and then you might overcook your soup, so. Anyway, this is the basic blueprint. I'm going to bring this to a gentle simmer and cook it until the potatoes and broccoli stumps are done. So while my soup is coming to the simmer and cooking, I'm just going to take care of the rest of the ingredients. Again, this is like optional. You don't have to add fresh herbs or parsley, but I have this bunch of parsley that's getting old. So I'm going to take most of it, save some of it to put on fresh at the end. I'm going to add that towards the end of the cooking process so it doesn't get overcooked. That'll add a lot of like the fresh, brightness that I removed by not having the broccoli crowns in the soup. Another thing I'm going to add is I have this giant bag of spinach that I got to make some curry dish about a week ago, and I have some left over that I need to get rid of. So again, because this is very tender, it cooks in like a minute. I'm going to add it at the very end. I'm going to reserve a small handful for my husband's breakfast sandwich tomorrow, and the rest of it's going to go in the soup. I also have most of a big block of cheddar cheese left over. I made beer cheese a couple weeks ago. And so I'm going to grate about a cup of this for the soup, and the rest of it I'll probably freeze for later because I just don't have any immediate plans for cheddar cheese, and I don't want it to go bad. You can totally freeze cheese, by the way, especially if you're going to cook it after you've defrosted it. If you're the kind of person whose cheese goes bad on you, get into the habit of freezing it. And there's my cheese. So everything on this cutting board, I'm basically just going to add it towards the very, very end of the process, but it's there for me when I need it. So you want to simmer it gently. If you cook it too rapidly, you might curdle whatever dairy you have in here. So basically you simmer this gently, usually with the lid on, until the vegetables are done. So if you're using a softer vegetable like a pepper or a zucchini or tomato or something, this won't take that long. But if you're using something heartier like broccoli stumps or potato, this will take about maybe 15 minutes or so. Okay, so the broccoli stumps and the potatoes are cooked. So I'm just going to add all of the spinach and most of the parsley. I'm just going to reserve a little parsley for garnish, so my thumbnail will be pretty. That'll only take like a minute to cook. And meanwhile, I've got my handy dandy blender set up. So you can use a stick blender, but in my general experience, it does not work as well as a proper blender. So that's why I'm using a proper blender. Not all of this soup is going to fit in the blender in one batch, so I'm going to have to do it in a couple batches, which is annoying, but it is what it is. If you want the soup to be even smoother and creamier, you can pass it through a strainer, but I don't know, I don't feel like it. And see what the spinach and parsley has done, which I think is awesome. It looks like there's broccoli florets in the soup, even though there isn't. So that's pretty cool. Okay, now I'm going to add the cheese. This is about maybe 2 cups total. Usually when I make this soup, I make less of it, but I hadn't made it in a couple weeks. So there's like 2 weeks worth of broccoli stumps in here, which is why there's more soup, hence more cheese. I think in my recipe I have on my Patreon, it's only like a cup of cheese, but this is probably 1.5 cups to 2 cups of cheese. And you just stir that in until it melts, and then once the cheese melts, taste it for seasoning. Salt, pepper, any other spices you want to put in. This is where you can get really creative and add your personal touch. And it's like, if you make this soup a lot and you're getting tired of it, you know, add different spices to it. And that way, like, it'll taste like a different soup. Okay, I'm gonna taste you. You know, that could actually use more cheese. I'm gonna go ahead and grate more cheese. You know, it could definitely also use more salt, but I want to put all the cheese in first because cheese has salt in it. I mean, I have all this extra cheese. I might as well just like put a lot in here. I don't want to overdo it, but yeah. Cheese. This way it'll really give us broccoli cheddar soup vibes. I'll go ahead and add the rest of my black pepper that I have pre-ground. You could add nutmeg, you could add coriander, you could add cumin. Curry powder could be interesting. I don't know about curry powder with the cheese, but who knows? Cayenne pepper is another good addition, or hot sauce. Brian Lagerstrom's creamy soup blueprint includes adding a little splash of something acidic at the end, like lemon juice. Because I'm using tangy cheddar cheese in here, I don't think I'm going to do that. I don't think it'll really need it. Okay, now let's try you. That's much better. Still needs salt, but it definitely does not need as much salt now as it would have needed had I not added that extra cheese. I'm going to add a kick of cayenne as well. You could add smoked paprika to give it sort of a bacon-y flavor. I mean, you could also add bacon. I've made this soup at the very start, rendering some bacon and using that fat to build the soup in addition to butter or instead of butter, and then put the crumbled bacon bits back on at the end. I could have done that. I've got frozen bacon bits, but I didn't feel like defrosting them and putting them in here. That's another variation. I'm keeping this one simple because I'm boring. All right, now let's taste it. Ooh. So much more interesting, but it still needs salt. I didn't add very much salt while I was cooking it, and my homemade chicken broth is unsalted. I do that so that I can regulate my salt levels better. If you're using store-bought stock, you definitely will not need to add as much salt as I'm adding here. Yum, 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 yum. Okay, I'm calling it. That soup is done. Ladle yourself a bit. Now, like, a bowl of this soup is probably only about 300 to 350 calories, depending on how much butter and how much cheese you put in it. And that is insufficient for a meal. So to make it a proper meal, serve it with some bread. This is a bread roll that I made yesterday, and I've just popped it into a 350-degree oven to reheat so it's nice and fresh. So yeah, I love this blueprint for turning old veggies, veggie scraps, veggies that you have no plans for, no use for, turning them into something yummy. And I especially love this broccoli stump cheddar soup, which, as I said, I'm making it a lot these days because my husband and I have been on a roasted broccoli floret kick. So if you find yourself with some leftover broccoli stumps, go ahead and try making this, or any other leftover veggies that you have lying around in your fridge. Try making this. It's a great way to use them up and get something nutritious in you. Bye-bye.
Thank you to my patrons for making this and other videos on this channel possible, especially Britt, Honey Badgers, Megan M, Matthew, Jenny D, Jocelyn, Gina F, Megan B, Data Fox, Gina S, Ruth, Katie, Lonesome Screams, Mihir, Morgan, Meet Vavo, Britta, Veda, Anna, and Aditya.